Sir, you're not sick. You're being poisoned. The words were so quiet they almost blended into the hum of the refrigerator, yet they froze Ethan Cole in place. He stood beside the breakfast table, jacket draped over one arm, the other hand hovering above his phone as if time itself had paused to listen. He turned slowly. The girl stood near the kitchen entrance, half shadowed by the long marble island. She couldn't have been more than 6. Too small for the space, too still for a child. Her hair was pulled back carelessly, her sweater hanging past her wrists. But her eyes were sharp, focused, fixed on him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. "What did you say?" Ethan asked. "You're not sick," she repeated. "They want you to think you are." For a moment, he simply stared at her. The kitchen around them looked exactly as it should, sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows, polished surfaces gleaming, the scent of fresh coffee filling the air. Everything in this house was designed to signal success, order, control. Words like poisoning did not belong here. "That's enough," he said quietly. "Who put you up to this?" "No one," the girl replied. Ethan exhaled through his nose, fighting the familiar wave of exhaustion that pressed against his temples. His private doctor called it chronic fatigue, a natural result of long hours and constant pressure. 40 years old, running a billion-dollar empire, his body was simply asking for rest. That explanation had comforted him for months. "You shouldn't say things like that," he told her. "People could get very upset." "They already are," she said. He frowned. "Who is they?" She hesitated, then glanced toward the hallway leading to the basement stairs. Her small fingers twisted together, as if she were bracing herself. "The ones who make your breakfast," she said, "and the man who tells you you're tired." The words landed heavier than he expected. Ethan pulled out a chair and sat down, more to steady himself than anything else. On the table before him lay his untouched meal: scrambled eggs, toast, fruit arranged neatly on white china. Beside it sat his vitamins and morning pills, lined up with military precision. He'd taken them every day, without question. "You think I'm being poisoned," he said slowly. "And you think I'm not sick at all." She nodded. "You don't look sick. You look slowed." Something cold slid down his spine. "That's a big accusation," he said. "Do you know what poisoning means?" "It means someone wants you weak," the girl replied. "Not dead, just weak enough." Ethan felt his pulse quicken. "Why would anyone want that?" "So you stop asking why," she said. "That's what they said." He leaned back slightly, studying her face. There was no triumph there, no fear either, just a blunt honesty that felt far older than 6 years. "Where did you hear this?" he asked. "Downstairs," she said. Under the kitchen, the image formed uninvited in his mind, the narrow space beneath the basement stairs. The place where sound traveled in strange ways. He had walked past it hundreds of times, never once thinking about who might be sitting there, listening. "They talk in the mornings," she continued. "Early, when everyone's asleep." "Who talks?" Ethan pressed. "The woman who brings your plate," she said, "and the man with the nice watch." His chest tightened. "What exactly did they say?" he asked. She swallowed. "They said small amounts. Every day. Breakfast is easiest because people trust breakfast." She paused, then added, "They said no one questions a tired man." Ethan's eyes drifted to the pills again. Harmless, clean, approved. His doctor's voice echoed in his memory, calm, confident, reassuring. "You're just overworked, Ethan. Listen to your body. Trust me." A sudden dizziness hit him, sharper this time. He gripped the edge of the table until it passed. "You're telling me I'm not ill," he said quietly. "That everything I've felt isn't natural." She nodded. "You weren't like this before." His breath caught. "You've been watching me? I notice things," she said. "You get tired after you eat. Not before." Ethan pushed his plate away, the porcelain scraping softly against the table. The sound seemed too loud in the sudden silence. "This is a very serious thing to say," he told her. "If you're wrong." "If I'm wrong," she interrupted gently, "nothing changes." "And if you're right?" She met his gaze without blinking. "Then you're not sick. You're being hurt. Footsteps echoed faintly from upstairs. Familiar, measured. You need to go, Ethan said, his voice low now. Before someone sees us talking, the girl nodded, relief flickering briefly across her face. She turned to leave, then stopped. Don't eat it, she said again. Just once. See? Then she was gone, slipping down the hallway toward the parts of the house that didn't belong to him. Moments later, his wife entered the kitchen, radiant as always, a smile already in place. You haven't eaten, she said, glancing at the table. You'll feel worse if you skip breakfast. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. At the ease with which she scanned the plate, at how naturally her eyes moved to the pills. I'm not sick, he said. She laughed softly. Of course you are, the doctor said. I know what the doctor said, Ethan replied. She paused. Just long enough. The fatigue was still there. Heavy and familiar. But beneath it, something else stirred sharp, unwelcome, undeniable. For the first time in months, Ethan Cole didn't feel ill. He felt warned. Ethan did not eat breakfast that morning. The decision came quietly, without drama. After his wife left the kitchen, her steps light. Her concern carefully measured, he remained standing by the table, staring at the untouched plate. The eggs had begun to cool. The toast had lost its warmth. The pills sat beside the glass of juice, pale and unremarkable, waiting to be trusted. He covered them with his napkin. By the time he reached his office upstairs, the familiar heaviness in his body was still there, but it no longer felt like an anchor dragging him down. It felt observed, measured, as if his body itself were waiting to see what he would do next. From the window, the estate looked flawless. The lawn crew worked in quiet efficiency. Cars moved along the distant road in smooth, predictable patterns. The world was functioning exactly as designed, only he felt misaligned within it. His phone rang. Ethan, his private doctor said, his tone calm, practiced. Your wife mentioned you skipped breakfast. Ethan leaned back in his chair. I wasn't hungry. That's the fatigue, the doctor replied without hesitation. Your body is shutting down non-essential signals. You need to maintain routine. What happens if I don't? Ethan asked. A brief pause. You'll feel worse. And if I don't? Another pause, longer this time. You will, the doctor said, more firmly. These symptoms don't just disappear. Ethan thanked him and ended the call. He sat in silence for a moment, replaying the conversation. The doctor hadn't asked how he felt, only whether he had obeyed. By mid-morning, something unsettled him. He didn't feel worse. Normally, by 10 o'clock, the fog would thicken. His thoughts would slow, words blurring together, meetings turning into endurance tests. Today, the fatigue hovered at the edges, but his mind felt sharper. He noticed small details, the steadiness of his hands, the ease with which he followed complex emails, the absence of that familiar pressure behind his eyes. It wasn't improvement, but it was a pause in decline. At lunch, Ethan claimed a work call and ate alone in his office. He ordered food from outside the house, something untouched by the routines of his kitchen. As he ate, he waited for the crash. It never came. Instead, memories surfaced. His wife insisting he eat at home. It's safer, she'd always said. The doctor recommending new supplements. The way both of them watched him after meals, subtle but attentive. He had called it care. He had wanted to believe it was love. That afternoon, Ethan did something he hadn't done in years. He went downstairs. The basement kitchen smelled faintly of detergent and cooked vegetables. Staff members moved carefully when they saw him, their voices dropping, their bodies stiffening. He nodded politely, offering small greetings, aware of the invisible line that separated him from them. Near the laundry room, he saw the girl sitting on the floor with a coloring book, her legs tucked beneath her. She looked up when she sensed him and froze. Ethan stopped several feet away, lowering his voice. You said I'm not sick, he said. She nodded. I didn't eat, he added. Her eyes flicked to his face, studying him with unsettling seriousness. Do you feel the same? He considered the question. Not exactly. She nodded once, as if that confirmed something important. That's how it starts. Ethan crouched slightly. bringing himself closer to her level. "Why are you so sure?" he asked. "Why tell me?" She hesitated. "Because they think I don't understand." "Understand what?" he asked. She shrugged. Grown-up voices. They forget children hear everything. Footsteps echoed nearby. The girl stiffened, instinctively pulling her coloring book closer. Ethan straightened just as her mother entered the room, her face draining of color when she saw him. "I'm sorry," the woman said quickly. "She shouldn't be talking to you." "She didn't do anything wrong," Ethan said. "She helped me." The woman looked confused, then frightened. Ethan saw it clearly now, the fear of someone who knew too much, but had no power to change it. "What's your name?" Ethan asked the girl gently. She looked up at him, uncertain. "Annie, Annie," he repeated. The name settled in his chest heavier than he expected. "Thank you for being honest with me." She nodded, not smiling, not proud, just relieved. That evening, Ethan refused dinner. His wife laughed at first, brushing it aside as another symptom. "You're overthinking everything," she said. "One skipped meal doesn't mean anything." "I'm not trying to prove anything," Ethan replied. "I'm paying attention." Her smile tightened. "The doctor won't approve." "I'll talk to him," Ethan said. She watched him closely as he left the table, her gaze lingering longer than usual. Upstairs, alone in the bathroom, Ethan stared at his reflection. The dark circles under his eyes remained. The fatigue hadn't vanished, but beneath it, something else had appeared. Clarity. That night, he lay awake listening to the house breathe around him. Pipes shifted, doors closed softly. Somewhere below, the kitchen settled into silence. He imagined voices in that space, calm and deliberate, discussing him as if he were a problem to be managed. He thought of a 6-year-old girl sitting quietly under the stairs, listening because no one thought she mattered. For the first time since his symptoms began, Ethan Cole allowed himself to accept the possibility that he was not ill. He was being controlled, and now that he knew Annie's name, the truth no longer felt like a whisper. It felt like a warning. If this story made you pause and think, let us know by liking this video. Share your thoughts in the comments where you are watching right now. And if you believe stories like this matter, subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next one. Ethan woke before dawn, the way he used to years ago, before fatigue had taught his body to surrender slowly. For a moment, he lay still, listening. The house was quiet, but not asleep. Large houses never truly slept. They breathed. Air moved through vents. Pipes clicked softly behind walls, somewhere far below. A door opened and closed with deliberate care. He did not move. In the dim light, memories surfaced uninvited. Mornings when he had woken energized, eager to run, to work, to build. Mornings when breakfast had been fuel, not obligation. He realized with a jolt that he could no longer remember the last time he had woken up hungry. Ethan sat up. His head felt heavy, but clearer than it had in months. The fog was still there, lingering at the edges, but it no longer ruled him. That frightened him more than weakness ever had. He dressed quietly and avoided the master bathroom. Instead, he used the guest one down the hall, locking the door behind him, an instinct he didn't question. When he caught his reflection in the mirror, he studied it carefully. The same face, the same lines of stress around the eyes, but something had shifted behind them. Awareness. Downstairs, the kitchen lights were already on. His wife stood at the counter, her back to him, moving with practiced efficiency. The doctor was there too, standing close, his voice low. They didn't hear Ethan at first. "He skipped dinner again," his wife was saying. "That's not normal." "It's resistance," the doctor replied calmly, "which is expected." Ethan stopped just outside the doorway. "Resistance turns into paranoia if it's not managed," the doctor continued. "We may need to adjust." "Adjust how?" she asked. "A little more consistency," he said. "A little less choice." Ethan stepped into the room. Both of them turned at once. "Good morning," his wife said quickly, her expression rearranging itself into concern. "You're up early." "So are you," Ethan replied. The doctor smiled, unbothered. "I wanted to check in," he said. "Your wife was worried about you." "I'm standing right here." Ethan said. You can talk to me. Of course, the doctor said smoothly. How are you feeling today? Ethan considered the question carefully. Different. That's not a medical description, the doctor replied. No, Ethan said. It's an honest one. His wife stepped closer. You didn't take your pills last night. I didn't, Ethan said. And I won't be taking them today, the doctor frowned. That's not advisable. Neither is telling a healthy man he's sick, Ethan replied. The air shifted. Not dramatically, subtly, like pressure before a storm. You're exhausted, the doctor said. That affects judgment. So does being poisoned, Ethan said evenly. His wife laughed. Too fast. Too loud. Ethan, stop this. You're frightening yourself. Am I? He asked, turning to her. Or am I finally paying attention? She reached for his arm. He stepped away. I'm going out, he said. Alone. You shouldn't, the doctor said. Now isn't the time. It's exactly the time, Ethan replied. He left before either of them could stop him. The drive calmed him. The city was already awake, people lining up for coffee, commuters standing at bus stops, older couples walking their dogs with quiet familiarity. Life moved without permission, without schedules arranged by others. He realized how long it had been since he'd felt part of it. He parked outside a small diner and sat there for a while without going in. The smell of bacon drifted through the open door. His stomach stirred faintly. Surprised, he smiled grimly. By late morning, Ethan went downstairs. The basement kitchen was quieter than usual. Staff members worked with their heads down, conversations hushed. When they saw him, several stiffened. One woman crossed herself under her breath. He found Annie sitting near the laundry room, folding towels with meticulous care far beyond her years. She looked up when she sensed him. You didn't eat, she said. No, Ethan replied. And I didn't take the pills. Her small hands paused. Are they mad? Yes, he said. Very. She nodded, as if she had expected no other answer. They talked again this morning, she said. What did they say? Ethan asked, keeping his voice low. That you're difficult, Annie replied. That you don't listen like you used to. Ethan exhaled slowly. Did they say anything else? She hesitated. They said you might need help, the kind you don't get to say no to. A chill crept up his spine. Did they say when? He asked. Annie shook her head. Just soon. Ethan crouched slightly, meeting her eyes. You did the right thing telling me, he said. But from now on, you need to be careful. If they ask you questions, you don't answer. Can you do that? She nodded. I'm good at being quiet. I wish you didn't have to be, Ethan said. That afternoon, he made a call. I need a lab, he said, when the line connected. Independent. No ties to my physician. I'll pay whatever it costs. There was a pause. Then a name. By the time he returned home, his wife was waiting. You didn't say where you were going, she said. I didn't need to, Ethan replied. Her eyes searched his face. You're changing. Yes, he said. I am. She reached for him again, softer this time. I'm trying to protect you. From what? Ethan asked. She didn't answer. That night, Ethan lay awake listening to the house. The headache returned, sharper now, but it felt clean, honest. His body was pushing back, recalibrating. Downstairs, Annie lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to footsteps pass her door. Voices murmured. Decisions were being made. Upstairs, Ethan stared into the darkness, his resolve hardening. If he wasn't sick, then someone had lied. And if someone had lied, then the truth was already moving, whether they liked it or not. Ethan left the house before sunrise the next morning, moving with the quiet precision of someone who no longer trusted his own walls. The air outside was cold and sharp, biting enough to make him fully awake. He welcomed it. Cold made him feel present, real. He drove without his usual driver, without security, without telling anyone where he was going. For years, his life had been scheduled down to the minute. Today, anonymity felt like freedom. The diagnostics lab was tucked between a law office and a dental clinic, anonymous by design. No logo, No welcoming lobby. Just a receptionist who didn't ask unnecessary questions and a technician who spoke in careful, neutral tones. Ethan handed over 2 items, a sealed bag containing his morning pills, and a small glass vial he had filled himself with green juice from the kitchen the day before, siphoned when no one was looking. "I want everything screened," he said. "Not just toxins. Anything that doesn't belong." The technician nodded. "Preliminary results in 24 hours. Full analysis within 48. Ethan paid in advance. Cash. Another quiet rebellion. On the drive back, the headache intensified, pulsing behind his eyes. His hands tightened on the steering wheel, but he didn't slow down. Pain, he reminded himself, was not the enemy. Deception was. When he returned home, the atmosphere had shifted. The house felt watchful. His wife greeted him in the foyer, her expression warm but strained, like a mask worn too long. "You didn't say where you were going," she said. "I didn't need to," Ethan replied, removing his coat. She studied him. "You're pushing yourself." "I'm reclaiming myself," he said, her lips parted as if to argue, then closed. She reached out, touching his sleeve lightly. He noticed how deliberate the gesture was, how grounding. "You trust me, don't you?" she asked softly. Once, the question would have felt absurd. "I'm trying to," Ethan replied honestly. That afternoon, the doctor called again. "You missed your check-in," he said. "I wasn't available," Ethan replied. "This is serious," the doctor said. "Your wife is worried." "You keep saying that," Ethan said, "but you never ask me what I'm worried about." Silence crackled through the line. "You're experiencing cognitive distortion," the doctor said finally. "That's common in cases like yours." "What cases?" Ethan asked. "Burnout," the doctor replied. "Anxiety, or chemical dependency," Ethan said. The doctor inhaled sharply. "You need rest. You need distance," Ethan replied, and ended the call. In the basement, Annie sat beside her mother, helping fold sheets. She worked quietly, her small hands precise. When Ethan entered the hallway, she looked up immediately. "They're watching you," she said in a low voice. "I know," Ethan replied. "They don't like that you left," Annie added. "That makes 2 of us," he said. Her mother stiffened, fear flickering across her face. "Annie," she said sharply. "Don't speak." "It's all right," Ethan said quickly. "She's not in trouble." The woman hesitated, then nodded, eyes downcast. Ethan crouched slightly, meeting Annie's gaze. "If anything changes," he said, "you tell me. But you don't confront anyone. You don't argue. You just listen." She nodded. Listening is safer. Ethan felt a surge of anger at that, at a world where a child learned survival before innocence. But he kept his voice steady. "You're doing the right thing." That evening, dinner was a performance. His wife insisted he sit at the table. The doctor was not present, but his influence was. The food was simple, familiar, comforting. Ethan didn't touch it. "You're proving nothing by starving yourself," his wife said. "I'm proving something to myself," Ethan replied. She said, "This can't continue." "You're right," Ethan said. "It can't." Her eyes searched his face. "What are you planning?" "Truth," he said. Later that night, Ethan sat alone in his office. Lights dimmed. Documents spread across his desk. He reviewed old medical reports, prescriptions, notes from the doctor. Patterns emerged with startling clarity now. Adjustments to dosage always followed moments when he asserted independence. Symptoms intensified after weekends spent at home. Control, disguised as care. His phone buzzed shortly after midnight. "Unknown number. This is the lab," the voice said quietly. "We ran a preliminary screen ahead of schedule." Ethan straightened. "And there are compounds present," the technician said. "Low-dose substances consistent with long-term chemical suppression. Not lethal, designed to impair energy, focus, resistance." Ethan closed his eyes. "So I'm not sick," he said. "No," the technician replied. "You're being dosed." "How long?" Ethan asked. "Months," the technician said. "Possibly longer." Ethan thanked him and ended the call. For several seconds, he didn't move. Then he stood and walked to the window, staring out into the darkened estate. Lights glowed softly in the staff quarters. Somewhere down there, a 6-year-old girl lay awake, listening to adults plot quietly, believing no one would hear. They were wrong. Ethan felt something solidify inside him. Not rage, not grief, but resolve. The kind that came after doubt was stripped away. He wasn't imagining it. He wasn't weak. He wasn't sick. He was being poisoned. And now, he had proof. Ethan slept less than 3 hours that night. But when he woke, the fatigue felt different. It no longer carried confusion with it. His body was tired, yes, but his mind was sharp, alert, almost unforgiving. The lab's words echoed with brutal clarity. You're being dosed. Months, possibly longer. There was no room left for doubt. No comfort left in denial. By morning, he had already decided what not to do. He would not confront them. Not yet. Downstairs, breakfast waited as always. His wife sat at the table, scrolling through her phone, the picture of calm efficiency. When she looked up and saw him, her smile came quickly, too quickly. You look awful, she said lightly. Did you sleep at all? Not much, Ethan replied, pulling out the chair. He sat, deliberately, placing himself back into the ritual he had disrupted. Relief flickered across her face before she could hide it. I'm glad, she said. Skipping meals wasn't helping. She slid the plate toward him. Eggs, toast, juice, and the pills, new ones again, set carefully beside the glass. Ethan looked at them without touching anything. You called the doctor last night, he said. She stiffened. I was worried. He didn't call me back, Ethan said. That's unusual for someone so concerned. He's busy, she replied. And you've been difficult. Ethan picked up his fork, then set it down again. I'm going to start eating again, he said. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. That's good, but not this, Ethan added, nudging the pills gently with his finger. Not yet. Her expression hardened. You're being stubborn. I'm being cautious, Ethan said. There's a difference. She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped herself. He noticed that too. The recalculation. The quiet shift in strategy. Eat, she said finally. We'll talk later. Ethan took a bite. Small. Controlled. He swallowed carefully, paying attention to every sensation in his body. The taste was normal. The act felt dangerous. As he ate, his wife watched him from across the table, pretending not to. That alone told him everything he needed to know. Later that morning, Ethan asked for the house to be quiet. I have meetings, he said. No interruptions. The staff obeyed. They always had. In his office, he locked the door and opened the file he had been building. He added the lab's preliminary results, carefully noting the language used. Low-dose chemical suppression, long-term dependency, cognitive dulling. Words that sounded clinical, detached. Words that described the theft of his autonomy. He then did something else. He began preparing contingencies, new passwords, new financial authorizations, quiet emails to attorneys he trusted, people his wife had never met, never vetted. He didn't explain everything. He didn't need to. He simply said he required discretion. Discretion was a language powerful people understood. By early afternoon, the headache returned. Sharper now. His body reacting to the partial return to routine, to the absence of chemicals it had been forced to accept as normal. He welcomed the pain. It meant something was changing. Downstairs, Annie sat alone near the storage room, knees tucked beneath her. Listening, she heard the doctor's voice arrive without announcement, heard the tension sharpen the air, heard her mother retreat into silence. She waited. Ethan met the doctor in the living room. I want the truth, Ethan said. Without preamble, the doctor sighed, as if exhausted by the question. You're spiraling. I have lab results, Ethan replied. That stopped him. Independent, Ethan added. No connection to you. The doctor's eyes flicked, just briefly, toward the hallway, toward the kitchen, toward where Annie sat, unseen but present. That lab doesn't know your history, the doctor said carefully. They know chemistry, Ethan replied. That's enough. You're drawing conclusions, the doctor said. Dangerous ones. No, Ethan said. I've reached one. The doctor straightened. If you continue down this path, I'll have to consider recommending intervention. Ethan tilted his head. From whom? From people who care about your well-being, the doctor said. Ethan smiled thinly. You keep saying that word. Care. The doctor didn't smile back. That evening, Ethan walked through the basement corridor alone. The hum of machines, the smell of detergent, the quiet industry of people who knew better than to be seen. This part of the house had always been invisible to him. Now it felt like the only honest place left. He found Annie sitting near the stairs, drawing again. They changed something, she said without looking up. Ethan's chest tightened. What do you mean? They talked about amounts, she said. They said maybe it needs to be faster. How much faster? Ethan asked. She shook her head. They didn't say numbers. Just soon. Ethan knelt in front of her, keeping his voice calm. You did exactly what you were supposed to do, he said. You listened. She looked up at him then. Are you going to be okay? Ethan hesitated. He chose honesty. I will be, he said, because you told me. That night, Ethan didn't sleep at all. He lay in bed, the pain ebbing and flowing, his body fighting to reclaim itself. He thought of how easily systems could be turned against the people they were meant to protect, how trust, once weaponized, became the most efficient tool of control. Somewhere below, Annie lay awake too, listening as always, and above her, Ethan Cole made a decision that would change everything. He would not wait for them to act. He would act first. Ethan moved first by doing nothing at all. That, he knew, was the most dangerous choice he could make for them. The next morning, he followed the routine precisely. He woke at the usual hour. He showered in the master bathroom. He dressed in the suit his wife had laid out the night before. When he came downstairs, he sat at the table without hesitation. His wife watched him closely, hiding relief behind efficiency. That's better, she said, sliding the plate toward him. Your body needs consistency. So do people. Ethan replied mildly. He ate. Slowly, carefully. Not enough to raise suspicion, not enough to satisfy her. He drank the juice, but left the pills untouched. She noticed. You forgot something, she said. I didn't forget, Ethan replied. I'm spacing them out. Her lips pressed together. The doctor said. I'll speak to him later, Ethan said, cutting gently but firmly. I have meetings. He left the house under her watchful gaze, aware that compliance was more alarming than defiance. Outside, he felt the familiar headache begin to bloom behind his eyes, sharper than the day before. He welcomed it. It meant his body was still fighting. Instead of going to his office, Ethan drove to a small law firm across town. The building was old, unimpressive, the kind of place no one looked at twice. He had chosen it for that reason. Inside, he met with a man he trusted, because he had nothing to gain from Ethan's approval. I think someone is trying to control me medically, Ethan said without preamble. Possibly to the point of incapacitation. The attorney didn't react. He simply nodded. Do you have evidence? I will, Ethan replied. Soon. Then we proceed quietly, the attorney said. No confrontation. No signals. That word again. Quiet. By the time Ethan returned home, the house felt tighter, as if the walls themselves had been drawn inward. Conversations stopped when he entered a room. His wife smiled too often, too brightly. The doctor arrived late afternoon. I hear you're eating again, he said, clapping Ethan lightly on the shoulder. I am, Ethan replied. And the medication? I'm evaluating, Ethan said. That's not how treatment works, the doctor replied. It is when the patient decides to live, Ethan said calmly. The doctor's jaw tightened. You're playing a dangerous game. So are you, Ethan replied. The doctor leaned closer, lowering his voice. If you continue to destabilize, people may step in. For your own good, Ethan met his gaze. Be very careful with that phrase. That evening, the headache intensified. Ethan excused himself early and went to bed, leaving his wife downstairs. The pain came in waves now, his body reacting violently to the absence of chemicals it had come to rely on. He lay still, breathing through it, refusing to call for help. At some point, The pain broke, not disappeared, broken, like a fever finally turning. He slept. Downstairs, Annie lay awake. She had heard the doctor's voice earlier, sharper than usual. She had heard her mother cry quietly in the laundry room. She had heard words like liability and escalation and compliance. Late that night, she heard footsteps outside her door. She held her breath. The door opened slightly. A shadow crossed the floor. Someone stood there, listening, checking. The door closed again. In the morning, Annie found Ethan waiting near the stairs. "You didn't sleep much," she said. "I slept enough," he replied. "They were in the hallway last night," she whispered. "Near the rooms." Ethan's chest tightened. "Did they say anything?" "They said you're running out of time," Annie replied. "They said if this doesn't work, they'll make it work." Ethan crouched to her level, keeping his voice steady. "You did exactly what you were supposed to do," he said. "You told me." "Am I in trouble?" she asked. "No," Ethan said immediately. "You're protected." She searched his face. "By who?" "By me," he said. That afternoon, Ethan received the full lab report. He read it slowly, line by line. Names of compounds, timelines, effects. Dosages adjusted incrementally over months. Designed not to kill, but to weaken. To dull resistance. To create dependence. He closed the file and sat back, the truth settling into him like weight. He wasn't sick. He had been managed. Ethan stood and walked to the window, looking out over the estate. The house was beautiful, impressive, a perfect stage for a quiet crime. Behind him, the door opened. His wife stepped inside. "You look pale," she said. "I have proof," Ethan replied. Her breath caught, just slightly. "Proof of what?" she asked. "That I'm not ill," Ethan said. "And that someone wanted me to be." Silence filled the room. Outside, a child's laughter drifted faintly from somewhere far beyond the property line, a sound untouched by control or fear. Ethan turned back to his wife, his voice calm, resolute. "This ends now," he said. Ethan did not raise his voice. That was what unsettled her most. He stood near the window, the full lab report folded once in his hand, not waved, not thrust forward like an accusation. Outside, the morning light fell cleanly across the lawn, indifferent to what was about to fracture inside the house. "I have proof," he repeated. "Independent. Documented." His wife did not move. For a long moment, she simply looked at him, as if recalculating which version of him stood before her. The tired one had been easier, predictable. "Proof can be misunderstood," she said carefully. "So can exhaustion," Ethan replied. "But chemistry doesn't lie." She took a slow step closer. "You're drawing dangerous conclusions." "I'm drawing accurate ones," he said. "The substances were in my system. Low dose, long term, adjusted." Her eyes flicked to the paper in his hand. "You had no right," she said. That surprised him. Not denial, not outrage. Possession. "I had every right," Ethan replied. "It was my body." She exhaled, the tension finally surfacing. "You don't understand the pressure we were under." "We," Ethan repeated. "You and the doctor." She said nothing. "That silence," Ethan continued quietly, "is louder than anything you could say." She crossed her arms, defensive now. He was getting weaker. "You were slipping. The board was watching. Investors were watching. Someone had to keep things stable." "By poisoning me?" Ethan asked. She flinched at the word. It wasn't poison. It was management. The word landed like a confession. "Management?" Ethan repeated. "Of what?" "Of risk," she said. "Of you." Ethan closed his eyes for a brief moment. Not in pain, but in grief. He saw their early years clearly. Now the ambition, the partnership, the way control had slowly replaced trust without either of them naming it. "You didn't try to kill me," he said. "You tried to own me." Her voice broke. "I was afraid." "So was I," Ethan said. "I just didn't know why." Footsteps echoed in the hall. The doctor stood in the doorway, his expression tight, eyes sharp. He had clearly been listening. "This conversation is becoming unproductive," the doctor said. "Ethan, you're not in a state to—" "Stop," Ethan said. The word carried weight. Finality. I have the report, Ethan continued. I have timelines, adjustments, your notes. The doctor's jaw tightened. Those substances were within acceptable. Acceptable to whom? Ethan asked. Certainly not to me. The doctor glanced at Ethan's wife. A silent exchange passed between them. We were protecting you, she said quickly. From yourself. By making me dependent, Ethan replied. By dulling my judgment. By isolating me. You would have left, she said suddenly. I could feel it. You were pulling away. So you pulled me down instead, Ethan said. The room felt smaller now. The walls closer. I'm ending this, Ethan said. Today, the doctor straightened. You can't just sever medical oversight. There are protocols. There are laws, Ethan replied. And you violated them. Silence followed. Thick, unforgiving. From somewhere below, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of a child laughing. A brief, careless sound. Quickly hushed, Ethan's gaze shifted instinctively toward the floor. Leave, he said to the doctor. This isn't over, the doctor replied. It is for you, Ethan said. You'll hear from my attorney. The doctor hesitated, then turned and walked out. His steps measured but no longer confident. Ethan faced his wife again. I'm filing a report, he said. Not out of revenge, out of responsibility. Her shoulders sagged. You'll destroy everything. No, Ethan said. You already did. I'm just naming it. She sank into the chair, covering her face with her hands. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered. You hurt me the moment you decided I didn't get to choose, Ethan said. He turned and left the room. Downstairs, the staff froze when they saw him. Word traveled quickly in houses like this. Tone shifts, doors closing harder than usual, authority cracking. Ethan moved past them toward the basement corridor. Annie was sitting near the stairs, her back straight, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked up the moment he appeared. They're arguing, she said. They were, Ethan replied. Her eyes searched his face. Is it bad? It's over, he said. But the ending will take time. She nodded, absorbing that with the solemn understanding of someone who had learned patience too early. Did I do something wrong? She asked. No, Ethan said firmly. You did something brave. She looked down. Grown-ups don't like brave. I do, Ethan said. He knelt slightly so they were closer in height. From now on, things are going to change. Some people will be angry. Some will lie. But none of that is your fault. She studied him carefully. Are you still sick? Ethan smiled for the first time in days. A real smile. Tired, but clear. No, he said. I never was. She let out a small breath, as if she'd been holding it for weeks. That night, Ethan packed a bag. Not to run. To prepare. He placed the lab reports, the recordings, the notes he had kept meticulously over the past days into a single folder. Evidence didn't need anger. It needed order. Outside, the house stood silent, its beauty unchanged, its truth exposed. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, the ache in his body steady but manageable, his mind sharper than it had been in months. Control had thrived in silence, and silence was over. Ethan left the house before dawn, carrying only the bag he had packed the night before. He did not sneak. He did not rush. He moved with the deliberate calm of a man who had already crossed the most dangerous threshold, the one inside his own mind. The driver watched him from the front seat, uncertain, waiting for instructions that never came. I'll drive myself, Ethan said. The man hesitated. Sir, your wife is not my authority, Ethan replied evenly. He took the keys and stepped into the cold morning air. The sky was pale, undecided, the hour when the world felt unfinished. As he drove away, the estate receded behind him, its lights still glowing softly, pretending nothing had changed. But everything had. His first stop was not the police. Not yet. Power taught him patience. Survival had taught him timing. He drove to a small office building on the edge of the city, nondescript and quiet. Inside, an attorney he trusted waited without ceremony. No pleasantries. No curiosity. Just readiness. Ethan laid the folder on the desk. Medical manipulation, he said. Conspiracy. Long-term chemical control. The attorney flipped through the documents slowly. his expression tightening with each page. "This is serious," he said finally. "I know," Ethan replied. "That's why I'm here. We'll need statements. Corroboration." "You'll have it," Ethan said. "There's a witness." The attorney looked up. "An adult?" Ethan hesitated for half a second. "A child." The attorney's eyes hardened not with doubt, but with understanding. "Then, we move carefully." When Ethan returned home later that afternoon, the house felt hollow. The doctor was gone. His wife was nowhere to be seen. The staff moved quietly, avoiding his gaze, unsure which version of him remained in control. Authority, he realized, was fragile. It depended entirely on belief. In the basement corridor, he found Annie sitting alone, her back against the wall, knees drawn close. She looked up when she saw him, relief flickering across her face before she caught herself. "They're gone," she said. "Yes," Ethan replied. "For now." She nodded, accepting uncertainty as a familiar companion. "Did you get in trouble?" she asked. "No," Ethan said. "I did something important." She thought about that. Important things make people angry. They do, Ethan agreed, but they also make things right. He sat on the step across from her, the concrete cold even through his suit. For a moment, neither spoke. "Annie," he said gently, "I may need you to tell your story to some people." Her shoulders tensed. "The doctor?" "No," Ethan said quickly. "People who can stop him. People who will listen." She stared at the floor. "Grown-ups don't listen to kids. Some do," Ethan said. "And the ones who don't? I'll make them." She looked up at him then, studying his face. "Will my mom be okay?" "Yes," Ethan said without hesitation. "I promise." That evening, the police came quietly. No sirens. No spectacle. Just two officers and a detective who spoke softly and took notes carefully. Ethan gave his statement without embellishment, without anger. Facts were enough. When they asked about witnesses, Ethan glanced toward the basement hallway. Annie's mother stiffened when she realized what was happening, fear flooding her face. Ethan stepped forward immediately. "She's safe," he said. "Both of them are." The detective nodded. "We'll handle this gently." Annie stood in the doorway, small and still, watching adults rearrange the world she had disrupted simply by listening. When the detective crouched to her level, Annie didn't flinch. "I heard them talk," she said plainly. "They thought no one could hear me." The detective's pen paused. "Sometimes," he said softly, "the truth hides in places people forget to look." Night fell slowly. Ethan sat alone in his office, the headache finally easing into something bearable. His body felt raw, as if waking from a long, unnatural sleep. Pain remained, but it was honest pain now, unmasked. He thought of how close he had come to disappearing without ever leaving, of how easily a life could be erased not by violence, but by quiet control. Somewhere downstairs, Annie laughed briefly at something her mother whispered to her. The sound startled him. It felt out of place in this house. And that, he realized, was exactly why it mattered. Ethan stood and looked around the room. The shelves of awards, the framed headlines, the symbols of a success that had nearly blinded him. Real power, he understood now, was not in what you owned. It was in what you refused to surrender. He closed the door behind him and turned off the light, leaving the room in darkness for the first time in years. The silence no longer felt dangerous. It felt earned. The house did not erupt after the police left. That surprised Ethan. He had expected shouting, accusations, doors slamming, some theatrical collapse of the life he had built. Instead, the silence settled deeper, heavier, as if the truth itself had pressed down on every room and ordered it to stay still. By morning, his wife was gone. She hadn't packed much. Just a single suitcase removed quietly before sunrise, her departure arranged through attorneys rather than words. No note. No apology. No explanation. Control, Ethan realized, did not like to speak once it was exposed. It preferred retreat. He stood alone in the master bedroom, staring at the empty closet space where her clothes had been. The absence felt strange, but not painful. Pain required surprise. This felt inevitable. Downstairs, The staff gathered in small clusters, whispering. When Ethan entered the kitchen, the murmurs stopped. Faces turned toward him with uncertainty, fear, and something else he had never noticed before. Expectation. "I want everyone to listen," Ethan said calmly. They froze. "I know the last few days have been confusing," he continued. "Some of you were asked to keep quiet. Some of you felt things were wrong but didn't know how to say it." No one spoke. "That ends now," Ethan said. "No one here will be punished for telling the truth." A breath passed through the room, collective and fragile. From the doorway, Annie watched. Her fingers curled into the sleeve of her sweater. Her mother stood beside her, tense, ready to pull her away if necessary. Ethan's gaze met Annie's. She didn't look away. "I want you both to stay," Ethan said, addressing her mother directly. "If you want to," the woman swallowed hard. "We don't want trouble." "You won't have it," Ethan said. "Not here." That afternoon, Ethan met with the detective again. This time, it wasn't in his house. It was in a quiet office downtown. Walls bare, fluorescent lights humming softly overhead. The detective slid a folder across the table. "We've opened a formal investigation," he said. "Your physician has retained counsel. Your wife has declined to comment." "That doesn't surprise me," Ethan replied. "We'll need to corroborate timelines," the detective continued. "Prescription records, financial ties. You'll find them," Ethan said. "They weren't careful. They didn't think they needed to be." The detective studied him. "You understand this will become public?" "Yes," Ethan said. "That's the point." When Ethan returned home, he found Annie sitting on the back steps, watching the sky change colors as evening approached. She swung her legs slowly, counting something only she could see. "Are they mad at you?" she asked. "Some are," Ethan said. "Some always will be." She considered that. "My mom says when people are mad, it's because they're scared." "That's often true," Ethan said. "Are you scared?" she asked. He paused. Honesty had become a habit now. "I was," he said. "Not anymore." She nodded, satisfied. That night, Ethan slept deeply for the first time in months. Not long, but deeply. He dreamed of running not away, but forward, his breath steady, his body responding to him again. When he woke, his muscles ached, but the fog was gone. The pain felt like healing, not punishment. In the days that followed, the world pressed in. Calls from board members, concerned messages disguised as loyalty, media inquiries testing the edges of the story. Ethan answered selectively, refusing drama, offering only facts. He did not defend himself. He didn't need to. The truth, once loose, did not require embellishment. One afternoon, as he walked through the kitchen, he noticed Annie standing on a stool, carefully washing an apple at the sink. "You don't have to do that," he said gently. She shrugged. "I like to help." He watched her for a moment. "Do you know why what you did mattered so much?" he asked. She frowned. "Because you didn't get sick?" "Yes," Ethan said. "But also because you didn't stay quiet." She thought about that. "Being quiet keeps you safe." "Sometimes," Ethan said. "Other times, it keeps bad things alive." She dried the apple carefully and handed it to him. "Then you can talk now," he smiled, taking it. "Yes, I can." That evening, Ethan sat alone in his study, drafting a statement, not for the press, for himself. He wrote about trust, about how easily it could be manipulated, about how power, when unchecked, grew lazy and cruel. He wrote about a child who listened when adults assumed she didn't matter. When he finished, he closed the document and leaned back, the weight of it settling comfortably in his chest. He was still tired. Recovery was not instant. Healing never was. But the tiredness no longer frightened him. It no longer belonged to someone else's plan. Downstairs, laughter drifted faintly from the kitchen. Annie and her mother, sharing something small and human. The sound grounded him more than any medication ever had. Ethan stood and turned off the light. For the first time, the house felt like a place to live, not a system to survive. The media found Ethan Cole on the fourth day. They didn't come with cameras at first, just voices on the phone, careful and curious, testing whether the story was real or rumor. Ethan let his assistant screen most of them, but he returned one call himself, not because he owed them anything, but because silence, he had learned, protected lies more than truth. "I'm not giving an interview," he said calmly. "I'm confirming facts." By noon, the story was no longer contained. Headlines moved fast once they had permission. A billionaire allegedly poisoned. A private physician under investigation. A marriage unraveling behind locked gates. The details were still vague, but the direction was clear. Control disguised as care had finally found daylight. Ethan watched the coverage without emotion. Rage would have been easier. Grief would have felt familiar. Instead, there was a steady, grounding resolve. He had crossed a line inside himself, and there was no returning to who he had been. That afternoon, he met with his board. The room was quiet in the way rooms became when power was unsure of itself. Men and women who had once deferred to him now studied him, searching for weakness, reassurance, advantage. "You should step back temporarily," one of them suggested gently. "For your health." "My health," Ethan replied, "is improving." A few exchanged glances. "This situation creates risk," another said. "Public confidence." "Was already at risk," Ethan interrupted. "You just didn't know it." He laid out the facts. No accusations, no dramatics, just documentation and timelines. The room shifted as he spoke, certainty replacing speculation. "I'm not stepping away," Ethan concluded, "but I am changing how we operate. Transparency isn't optional anymore." Silence followed. Then, slowly, nods. Not agreement, acceptance. When Ethan returned home, the house felt different again. Lighter. As if the walls had stopped listening, he walked through rooms he had once avoided, noticing details that had been invisible to him. Small cracks in molding, a chair slightly unbalanced, a window that didn't quite close. Imperfection felt honest. In the kitchen, Annie sat at the table with her mother, working through homework. She looked up when Ethan entered. "They're talking about you on TV," she said matter-of-factly. "I know," Ethan replied. "Is that bad?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said, "but not this time." Her mother watched him carefully. "People will ask questions," she said, "about her." "I won't let anyone hurt her," Ethan said. "Or you." The woman's shoulders eased just a little. Gratitude, Ethan had learned, was often quiet. That evening, Ethan received a call from the detective. "We've frozen the doctor's accounts," he said. "There's a financial trail. Payments, consulting fees that don't make sense." "And my wife?" Ethan asked. "She's cooperating through counsel," the detective replied, "which usually means she's afraid." Ethan thanked him and ended the call. Later, alone in his study, he opened the old running shoes he had kept untouched in the closet for years. He slipped them on slowly, testing the feel. His body protested at first, stiff and uncertain, but the pain was clean. Honest. He stepped outside. The night air was cool. The path around the estate was dark, the ground uneven in places. He walked at first, then jogged lightly, breath shallow, heart pounding harder than it had in months. After a minute, he slowed and laughed softly to himself. Not ready, but closer. When he returned inside, Annie was waiting near the stairs. "You ran," she said. "A little," Ethan replied. She smiled. A real smile this time. "That means you're getting better." He nodded. "It does." "Will they go to jail?" she asked. "Some will," Ethan said. "Some won't. Justice isn't always fair." "Some won't." She tilted her head. "Then, what's the point?" "The point," Ethan said, kneeling to her level, "is that the truth doesn't disappear just because it's inconvenient. Once it's out, it changes things, even when it doesn't fix everything." She considered that, then nodded. That night, Ethan wrote again. Not statements, not strategies. A letter he never intended to send. He wrote about trust and how easily it could be bent, about how a child's voice had cut through years of carefully maintained silence. He wrote one line and underlined it twice. "Real sickness is not in the body. It's in the lies we accept to feel safe." He slept after that, deeply. The ache in his muscles steady, the fog gone. When he woke, sunlight filtered through the curtains, soft and unthreatening. Downstairs, breakfast waited. Not arranged, not supervised. Simple food, prepared by many hands, none of them watching him eat. Ethan sat, poured his own coffee, and took a bite. Nothing happened. No dizziness, no heaviness, just the ordinary act of being alive. He smiled to himself, a quiet acknowledgement of how close he had come to disappearing. Outside, the world continued to talk. Inside, Ethan Cole began to live. Ethan's name no longer belonged to him alone. It moved through news cycles, boardrooms, and quiet conversations between people who would never meet him. Some spoke with sympathy, others with suspicion, a few with admiration that felt unearned. He learned quickly that once a story escaped, it became a mirror reflecting more about the viewer than the truth itself. He chose not to watch. On the morning of the 7th day, Ethan returned to his office for the first time since everything had surfaced. The building stood as it always had: glass, steel, confidence. But inside, something had shifted. People lowered their voices when he passed, not out of fear, out of awareness. He preferred that. His assistant hovered near the doorway. "There are requests," she said carefully. "Interviews, advocacy groups, a congressional aide." "Decline them," Ethan replied. "For now." She hesitated. "And your wife's attorney called again." Ethan nodded once. "Have them coordinate with mine." When she left, he closed the door and sat alone, staring at the city below. He felt the fatigue then, deeper than before. Not the chemical fog, not the false weakness. This was the tiredness that came from rebuilding something you had assumed was indestructible. Trust. At noon, he stepped outside and walked. No driver, no entourage, just a man in a tailored coat moving through a city that no longer recognized him as untouchable. People passed without looking twice. He welcomed the anonymity. At a small park near the river, he sat on a bench and watched pigeons scatter at the feet of passing children. A memory surfaced himself at 8 years old, sitting beside his father on a similar bench, listening to lectures about strength and self-reliance. No one had ever warned him about quiet threats. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. "This is the detective," the voice said. "We need to talk." They met later that afternoon in a quiet precinct office. No press, no observers. "We've connected the payments," the detective said, sliding a folder across the table. "Your physician received regular transfers routed through a consulting shell. Your wife authorized them." Ethan absorbed the information without surprise. "And the charges?" "Medical assault," the detective replied. "Conspiracy. Fraud." "And Annie?" Ethan asked. The detective looked at him steadily. "We're handling her involvement carefully. Child protection is involved, but not as a threat, as support." Ethan nodded. "She didn't ask for this." "No," the detective said, "but she may have saved a life." When Ethan returned home that evening, the house felt quieter than usual. Not tense, settled. He found Annie in the living room, building something from mismatched blocks on the floor. Her mother sat nearby, folding laundry, her movements calmer than they had been days ago. "They came today," Annie said without looking up. "Who did?" Ethan asked. "The nice lady," Annie replied. "She asked me questions." "And how did that feel?" he asked. She shrugged. "Okay." She listened. Ethan smiled faintly. "That matters." Annie stacked one last block carefully, then looked up at him. "Are you leaving?" The question caught him off guard. "No," he said. "Why would I leave?" "People on TV leave," she said simply. "When things get hard." Ethan knelt beside her. "I'm not going anywhere." She studied him, measuring the truth of it. Finally, she nodded and returned to her blocks. That night, Ethan sat alone at the kitchen table long after everyone had gone to bed. A cup of tea cooled untouched in front of him. He thought about how close he had come to vanishing without anyone noticing the cause. How easily his story could have ended as a footnote, another powerful man undone by stress. He imagined the alternative version of himself, weaker each day, trusting the wrong voices, surrendering agency one pill at a time. The thought made him shiver. He stood and walked through the house, stopping briefly outside Annie's door. She slept curled on her side, one hand tucked beneath her cheek, breathing evenly. A child at rest, something rare in a place that had once thrived on secrets. In his study, Ethan opened a new document, not evidence, not strategy. He titled it simply, Notes. He wrote about systems, how they failed the people they claimed to protect, about authority and how easily it silenced doubt, about children and how often they were ignored precisely because they saw too clearly. He wrote one sentence and paused, reading it twice. Power is most dangerous when it convinces itself it's being kind. The following morning, Ethan received confirmation that formal charges were moving forward. He felt no satisfaction, only gravity. Justice, he was learning, did not feel triumphant. It felt necessary. At breakfast, he ate slowly, deliberately, listening to the normal sounds of the house. The clink of dishes, the hum of conversation. No one watched him. Annie passed by with her backpack. "I have school," she announced. "I know," Ethan said. "I'll see you later." She stopped, then walked back and hugged him without warning. Brief, fierce. Then she pulled away, embarrassed. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" he asked. "For not being sick," she replied, and ran toward the door. Ethan sat there long after she left, the weight of that simple sentence settling into him. He wasn't sick. He had survived something most people never saw coming. And now, for the first time, he understood exactly what it meant to be responsible for the truth once it found you. Ethan learned that healing did not move in straight lines. Some mornings he woke with a clarity that surprised him, as if his body were grateful for finally being listened to. Other mornings, the fatigue crept back in, dull and persistent, reminding him that months of chemical control could not be undone by a few days of truth. He accepted both states without panic. Recovery, he told himself, was not a reward. It was a process. On the 8th day, the first court filing became public. The language was cold, precise, stripped of emotion. Medical manipulation, criminal negligence, conspiracy. Ethan read the document once, then closed it. He did not need to relive every detail. What mattered was that the lie had been named. That afternoon, his wife's attorney requested a meeting. Ethan considered refusing. Silence was tempting, but avoidance, he had learned, allowed others to rewrite the story. He agreed, on one condition. The meeting would be brief. They sat across from each other in a neutral office downtown. No glass walls, no dramatic lighting, just two men and a file between them. "She maintains she never intended permanent harm," the attorney said carefully. "I'm sure she does," Ethan replied. "She claims fear motivated her actions," the attorney continued. "Fear of abandonment, fear of instability. Fear doesn't justify control," Ethan said. "And it doesn't erase consent." The attorney nodded, as if he expected nothing less. "She's prepared to negotiate." "I'm not," Ethan replied. "I'm prepared to tell the truth." The meeting ended shortly after. When Ethan returned home, he found Annie in the backyard, sitting on the grass with a book open in her lap. She wasn't reading. She was watching the clouds, tracing shapes with her finger. "They look like animals," she said when she noticed him. "What kind?" Ethan asked. "Ones that don't exist anymore," she replied. He sat beside her, the ground cool beneath his palm. "Do you think they ever really disappear?" he asked. She shrugged. "Things don't disappear. They just stop being loud." Ethan smiled softly. Children had a way of explaining the world without trying. Later that evening, a call came from the detective. "We're moving faster than expected," he said. "Your cooperation helped." "And Annie?" Ethan asked. "She's being recognized as a protected witness," the detective replied. "No exposure, no pressure." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Thank you." After the call, he walked through the house, noticing how it had changed, not physically, emotionally. The staff spoke more freely now. Doors were left open. Laughter, once rare, surfaced in small, cautious bursts. Power, he realized, had been weighing everything down. In his study, Ethan opened his notes document again. He reread what he'd written days earlier and added a new line. "Control thrives where questions are discouraged." He paused, then added another. Children hear the truth long before adults are ready to face it. That night, Ethan dreamed again. This time, he was standing in his kitchen. Younger, healthier, unaware. His wife moved around him, smiling, placing a plate in front of him. He reached for the fork and stopped. He woke with his heart racing, sweat cooling on his skin. For a moment, panic threatened to take hold. Then he breathed through it, grounding himself in the present, the dark, the quiet, the reality that he was awake now. Downstairs, he poured himself a glass of water and sat at the table, listening to the house settle. Somewhere, Annie murmured in her sleep. The sound steadied him more than he expected. The following day, Ethan was invited to speak at a closed-door forum: medical ethics, corporate accountability, patient rights. He almost declined. Then he remembered how easily silence had nearly cost him his life. He agreed. Standing before a small audience of professionals, Ethan spoke without notes. He didn't dramatize. He didn't accuse. He told his story plainly, from the symptoms to the suspicion to the proof. When he finished, the room remained silent. Finally, an older man in the back spoke. "Why didn't you notice sooner?" Ethan didn't bristle. He had asked himself that question countless times. "Because I trusted the wrong certainty," he replied. "And because no one teaches you how to recognize care when it becomes control." Afterward, several people approached him quietly. Not for photos, for conversations. Stories surfaced similar patterns, similar dismissals, similar doubts that had gone unanswered. Ethan listened. That evening, Annie met him at the door when he returned home. "You were gone a long time," she said. "I was talking," Ethan replied. She nodded approvingly. "That's good. Talking keeps bad things from hiding." "Yes," Ethan said. "It does." At dinner, the table felt different again. No tension, no surveillance. Just food and conversation and the ordinary clatter of life continuing. Ethan ate slowly, savoring the simplicity of it. Halfway through the meal, Annie looked at him seriously. "You know," she said, "if you had been really sick, none of this would have mattered." Ethan considered that. "You're right," he said. "But you weren't," she continued. "You just needed someone to tell you." He met her gaze, understanding the weight of her words. "And you did." That night, as Ethan prepared for bed, he realized something unexpected. He no longer felt like a victim. What had been done to him was real, the damage undeniable, but survival had given him something else: responsibility. To speak, to protect, to ensure that what had almost happened to him did not happen quietly to someone else. As he turned off the light, his body tired but honest, his mind clear, one thought settled into him with calm certainty. Truth didn't save him alone. Listening did. Ethan noticed the change in Annie before anyone else did. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden laughter, no obvious relief. It was in the way she walked through the house, now less cautious, less prepared to disappear. She still listened, still observed, but she no longer shrank when adults raised their voices or doors closed too hard. Something fundamental had shifted. Safety, he realized, had a sound. On the 9th day, the first formal hearing was scheduled. Not the trial, just the beginning. Motions, jurisdiction, procedure. The kind of slow, grinding machinery that made justice feel distant and impersonal. Ethan dressed carefully that morning, choosing a suit he hadn't worn since before the fatigue began. It fit differently now, not looser, just honest. Before he left, he stopped in the kitchen. Annie was there with her mother, eating cereal, her backpack already slung over one shoulder. She looked up when she saw him. "Is today the big talking day?" she asked. "Yes," Ethan said. "Will they listen?" she asked. He paused, then answered truthfully. "Some will, some won't. But it won't matter." She frowned. "Why not?" "Because the truth doesn't need everyone," Ethan said. "It just needs enough." She considered that, then nodded as if filing it away for later use. Okay. At the courthouse, the atmosphere was controlled, restrained, almost antiseptic. Lawyers spoke in low voices. Reporters waited behind barriers, their questions rehearsed and sharpened. Ethan ignored them all, focusing instead on his breath, his footing, the quiet certainty that had replaced fear. Inside the room, his wife sat across from him. She looked smaller somehow, not physically diminished, but stripped of the authority she once wore so easily. When their eyes met, something passed between them, not anger, not sorrow, recognition. She looked away first. The proceedings were brief, procedural, necessary. When it was over, Ethan felt no relief, just forward motion. That, he was learning, was what progress actually felt like. Outside, a reporter shouted his name. "Do you forgive her?" the voice called. Ethan stopped walking. He turned slowly, meeting the question head on. "Forgiveness isn't the point," he said calmly. "Accountability is." The reporter tried again. "What about the doctor?" "He knew exactly what he was doing," Ethan replied. So did she. No more, no less. When he returned home that afternoon, the house was quiet in a different way, not tense, not cautious, simply occupied. Life happening in small, ordinary moments. Annie was at the dining table, working through a math worksheet, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Is 7 times 8 really 56? She asked without looking up. "Yes," Ethan said. She sighed dramatically. "That's unfair." He smiled. "Math doesn't care about fairness. Neither do grown-ups," she muttered. "Some do," Ethan said. "They just forget sometimes." Later, as the sun dipped low, Ethan found himself in the basement hallway again, the place where this story had truly begun. The walls looked the same, the stairs unchanged, but the air felt lighter, as if the space itself had been waiting for the truth to be acknowledged. Annie sat on the steps, tying and untying her shoelaces. "This is where I heard them," she said quietly. "I know," Ethan replied, sitting beside her. "They thought no one could hear down here," she continued. "Grown-ups forget things they don't use." "What did you hear that day?" Ethan asked gently. He had never asked her to repeat it. He hadn't needed to. But now, it felt right. She took a deep breath. "They said you were easier when you were tired," she said. "They said people don't fight when they're tired. They said you trusted them." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. The words still cut, but they no longer wounded. "Did that scare you?" he asked. She nodded. "But my mom says when you know something bad is happening, you tell someone bigger." Ethan smiled sadly. "You were the biggest one in the room that day." She looked at him, puzzled. "I was little. You were brave," he said. "That's bigger." That night, Ethan received a message from an advocacy group he'd spoken with earlier in the week. They wanted him to help fund a program education around patient rights, medical consent, silent abuse within trusted systems. He read the proposal slowly, carefully. It felt right, not as penance, as responsibility. Before bed, he checked on Annie one last time. She was asleep, one arm flung over her pillow, her breathing deep and steady. He stood there longer than necessary, letting the quiet reassure him. In his study, Ethan added another line to his notes document. "Justice begins when someone refuses to stay small." He shut down the computer and sat back, the day settling into his bones. He was tired, honestly tired, but it no longer frightened him. His body was his again. His mind clear. His choices, his own. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more procedures, more people eager to interpret his story for their own purposes. But tonight, the house was calm, and somewhere beneath the layers of wealth, power, and near destruction, Ethan Cole felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Grounded, Ethan understood something on the 10th day that no one had warned him about. Justice was slow, but exposure was immediate. By the time he woke that morning, his phone was already vibrating on the nightstand. Missed calls, messages, emails marked urgent. He didn't open any of them right away. Instead, he lay still, listening to the house. The rhythm had changed again, less guarded, more human. Downstairs, he could hear dishes clinking, a low hum of conversation, a child laughing briefly before being reminded to hurry. Ordinary sounds, the kind that had once been drowned out by control. He got up and dressed without assistance, choosing his clothes himself. It felt like a small thing. It wasn't. In the kitchen, Annie sat at the table finishing breakfast, her feet swinging under the chair. She looked up when she saw him. "Today feels loud," she said. He smiled faintly. "It will be. Is that bad?" she asked. "It depends," Ethan replied. "Sometimes loud is how things finally stop hiding." Her mother touched Annie's shoulder gently, a silent reminder to finish eating. The woman looked calmer now, but Ethan could see the fatigue in her eyes, the kind that came from being alert for too long, waiting for consequences. "They're outside," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. "I know." The press had gathered beyond the gate, not a mob, but enough to turn curiosity into pressure. Cameras, microphones. The soft impatience of people who believed they were entitled to answers simply because they had arrived. Ethan didn't go to them immediately. Instead, he went to his study. He opened the notes document one last time and read it from top to bottom, not as evidence, as a record of how close he had come to disappearing without anyone naming the cause. He added nothing, closed the file, saved it, then he went outside. The noise swelled the moment he appeared. Questions overlapped, voices competing for space. "Mr. Cole, did your wife confess? Are you pressing charges? Is it true a child exposed?" Ethan raised one hand. The gesture was small, but it worked. Years of authority didn't vanish overnight. "I will say this once," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I was not ill. I was being harmed. Quietly, systematically, by people I trusted." Cameras clicked. "I survived because someone without power spoke up," he continued. "That matters more than my name, my money, or my position." A reporter shouted, "Do you blame yourself?" Ethan looked directly at her. "No," he said, "but I do take responsibility for what happens next." He turned and walked back inside. The gates closed. The noise dulled. The house exhaled. That afternoon, the detective called again. "We're finalizing warrants," he said. "The doctor will be arrested within 48 hours. Your wife's charges will follow." Ethan felt no satisfaction. "Only wait." "Thank you," he said. After the call, he found Annie sitting in the hallway, her back against the wall, drawing quietly. She looked up. "They were loud," she said. "Yes," Ethan replied. "Will they stop?" she asked. "Eventually," he said. "Truth wears people out." She nodded, satisfied with that explanation. Later, Ethan drove alone to the courthouse to sign additional documents. No cameras this time, just paper, ink, and consequences. As he left the building, an older man approached him cautiously. "My brother died like that," the man said quietly. "They said it was stress." Ethan felt his chest tighten. "I'm sorry," he said. The man nodded. "I wish someone had listened to him." "So do I," Ethan replied. On the drive home, the fatigue returned briefly, heavy but familiar. He didn't fight it. He had learned the difference now between weakness imposed and tiredness earned. When he arrived, the house was unusually quiet. Annie's mother stood in the kitchen, hands clasped nervously. "They called," she said. "Child Services." Ethan's stomach tightened. "And? They said it's standard," she continued quickly. "Just questions." "But I'll be there," Ethan said immediately. "You won't do this alone." Her eyes filled with tears she tried not to let fall. "Thank you." That evening, Annie sat beside him on the couch, unusually still. "They won't take me away, right?" she asked. Ethan didn't hesitate. "No." "How do you know?" she pressed. "Because I won't let silence do that to you," he said. She leaned against him, small and trusting, and for the first time, he felt the full weight of what survival had given him. Responsibility. That night, Ethan slept deeply. Not because everything was resolved, but because it was finally moving in the right direction. He dreamed of doors opening, of rooms filling with light, of voices no longer whispering. When he woke, the house was quiet again. Not the dangerous quiet, the honest kind. Downstairs, breakfast waited, not arranged, not watched. Just food. Ethan poured his own coffee, sat at the table, and ate. Nothing happened. No dizziness, no fog. Just the simple, profound act of choosing for himself. In the hallway, Annie passed by, backpack on, ready for school. Are you still okay? She asked. Yes, Ethan said. I am. She smiled once, quick and certain, and ran toward the door. Ethan watched her go, the echo of her footsteps steady and sure. The truth had come out quietly at first. Now it was impossible to ignore. The call from Child Services came the next morning. Not accusatory, not alarmed. Calm, procedural. Delivered in a tone that suggested this was not their first careful step into a complicated house. Ethan listened without interrupting, his posture still, his jaw set not in defiance, but in readiness. Yes, he said. I'll be present. He ended the call and remained seated at the kitchen table for several minutes, staring at the surface where his breakfast plate still rested. The food had gone cold. He hadn't noticed. Some moments demanded attention more than hunger ever could. Across the room, Annie's mother stood by the sink, hands submerged in soapy water that had long since stopped being warm. She hadn't spoken since the call ended. They said it's routine, Ethan said gently. She nodded without turning around. They always say that. Ethan rose and moved closer, keeping a respectful distance. Routine doesn't mean cruel, he said, and it doesn't mean powerless. She finally looked at him. Fear and exhaustion tangled together. I've lost things before, she said quietly. Not because I did something wrong, just because someone else decided. Ethan understood that kind of loss. He nodded once. That won't happen here. The meeting was scheduled for early afternoon. Ethan insisted it take place at the house, not as a show of authority, but as a statement of transparency. Nothing hidden, nothing removed from context. If systems were going to judge, they would do it in the open. When the caseworker arrived, she was younger than Ethan expected. Professional. Measured, she took notes more than she spoke, listening with the kind of patience that made room for truth instead of rushing past it. I need to speak with the child, she said calmly. Annie sat on the couch, her feet tucked beneath her, hands folded in her lap the way she did when she sensed importance. Ethan stayed seated nearby, not looming, not absent, present. The questions were simple. Do you feel safe here? Yes. Did anyone tell you what to say today? No. Why did you tell Mr. Cole what you heard? Annie didn't answer right away. She looked at the floor, then up at the woman across from her. Because he wasn't sick, she said, and everyone kept acting like he was. The caseworker paused, pen hovering above the page. What made you sure? She asked. Annie shrugged. Sick people don't get better when they stop listening. Silence filled the room, not heavy, just thoughtful. When the caseworker finally stood to leave, she turned to Ethan. We'll continue to monitor, she said. But from what I see, this is a stable environment. She glanced briefly at Annie. More stable than most. After the door closed, Annie released a breath she'd clearly been holding. Did I say it wrong? She asked. No, Ethan said immediately. You said it perfectly. That evening, the detective called again. The doctor was taken into custody, he said. No resistance. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. And my wife? Formal charges were filed this afternoon, the detective replied. She's requesting mediation. I won't be there, Ethan said. That's your right, the detective replied. When Ethan ended the call, he felt the familiar ache return low, persistent, but no longer frightening. His body was reminding him that recovery wasn't linear, that even truth took time to settle into flesh. Later that night, Ethan found Annie sitting alone on the back steps, her knees drawn close, watching the sky darken. They took him? She asked quietly. Yes, Ethan said, sitting beside her. Is that good? She asked. It's necessary, he replied. She frowned slightly. My mom says necessary things still hurt. That's true, Ethan said. But they hurt less than letting bad things continue. She thought about that for a long moment. Will they stop now? Some will, Ethan said. Some won't. But they won't be able to pretend anymore. Annie nodded, satisfied with that answer. Inside, Ethan's phone buzzed again, this time from the advocacy group he'd been speaking with. They wanted to move forward. Faster. A public fund. Education programs. Resources for people who suspected quiet harm but didn't know how to prove it. He agreed, not because he wanted redemption, because he wanted interruption. That night, Ethan sat in his study long after the house had gone quiet. He reviewed documents, emails, proposals. The weight of responsibility pressed against him, heavy but familiar. This, too, was work, different from the kind he had built his fortune on, but more important. Before shutting down the computer, he added one more line to his notes document. Silence is not peace, it's just delay. Upstairs, Annie slept deeply, her breathing even, her dreams uninterrupted. Her mother slept too, exhaustion finally allowed to rest. Ethan stood in the hallway between their rooms and his own, realizing how close he had come to a world where neither of them would be safe, where his story would have ended quietly, conveniently. Instead, the truth had spoken in a small voice, and he had listened. As he turned out the light and closed his door, Ethan felt the ache in his body soften, not vanish, but ease. Healing didn't ask for perfection. It asked for honesty. Tomorrow would bring more consequences, more conversations, more resistance. But tonight, the house was calm, not controlled. Calm. Ethan woke to the sound of rain. It wasn't heavy, just a steady, patient rhythm tapping against the windows, the kind that soaked into the ground instead of flooding it. He lay still for a moment, listening, letting his breathing match the cadence. For the first time since everything began, the sound didn't make him tense. Rain meant time. Downstairs, the house moved slowly. No rush, no sharp edges. When Ethan entered the kitchen, Annie was already there, sitting at the table with her mother, coloring quietly while toast warmed in the oven. She looked up. "It's raining," she said, as if announcing a fact that mattered. "I know," Ethan replied. "Some days need it." Her mother smiled faintly at that, a small expression of relief that had become more common lately. Mid-morning, the call came from the advocacy group. They weren't asking anymore. They were building. "We've secured initial funding," the director said. "But your involvement changes the scale. People are listening because of you." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. "Then let's make sure what they hear is useful." They discussed practicalities, education materials, legal support, medical second opinions, a hotline staffed by people trained not to dismiss quiet fear, not a charity built on pity, but a system designed to interrupt harm before it calcified into tragedy. When the call ended, Ethan felt the familiar ache in his shoulders. Responsibility had weight, but it was a weight he chose. That afternoon, a letter arrived by courier. No return address. Ethan opened it carefully. It was from his wife, not handwritten, typed, precise. She wrote about fear, about feeling invisible beside his power, about believing that control was the same as protection. She wrote that she never meant for things to go as far as they did. She asked for forgiveness. Ethan read the letter once. Then again, he didn't feel anger or relief. He felt distance. Forgiveness, he knew now, was not a transaction. It was a process that required accountability, not explanation. He folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Not destroyed, not answered, just acknowledged. Downstairs, Annie sat on the floor building a tower from wooden blocks. It leaned dangerously to one side. "That one's going to fall," Ethan said. "I know," she replied, adding another block anyway. The tower collapsed. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She simply started again. Ethan watched her quietly. Resilience, he realized, didn't announce itself. It rebuilt. Later that day, he drove to the city again, this time to a community center tucked between aging apartment buildings. No cameras, no press, just a room of people who had come because someone they trusted told them to. Ethan stood at the front without notes. "I'm not here because I'm special," he said. "I'm here because I was lucky." A murmur moved through the room. "Lucky that someone without power noticed something was wrong," he continued. "Lucky that I listened before it was too late." A woman raised her hand. "What if no one listens?" Ethan met her gaze. "Then you keep talking. And you find someone bigger. And if that fails, you find someone braver." He didn't promise justice. He promised interruption. It felt more honest. That evening, as the rain eased into mist, Ethan returned home exhausted in the way that came from purpose, not depletion. He found Annie sitting on the couch, her shoes kicked off, watching an old cartoon. She patted the seat beside her. "You look tired," she said. "I am," Ethan replied, sitting down. "But it's the good kind." She nodded knowingly. "My teacher says there's a good tired." "She's right," Ethan said. "Are you still mad at her?" Annie asked suddenly. Ethan didn't ask who she meant. "No," he said after a moment. "But I'm not pretending either." "That's okay," Annie said. "My mom says pretending makes things heavier." Ethan smiled softly. "Your mom is wise." That night, the pain returned briefly sharp, insistent, then fading. His body still remembered what it had endured. He let the sensation pass without fear. Healing, he had learned, often arrived in waves. Before bed, he checked the locks, the lights, the quiet corners of the house. Not out of paranoia, out of care. In his study, he opened the notes document again and added a final line for the night. Bravery doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers and waits for someone to listen. Upstairs, Annie slept deeply, her tower of blocks rebuilt in dreams where things didn't fall unless she chose to knock them down. Ethan turned off the light and lay back, the rain now only a memory on the glass. His body was tired. His mind was clear. The danger had not vanished, but it no longer owned the silence. Tomorrow, there would be more meetings, more resistance, more truth to carry. But tonight, he allowed himself one simple certainty. He was alive, awake, and no longer alone in the work ahead. Ethan knew the end was approaching not because things were quiet, but because they were finally clear. On the morning of the 11th day, the rain had stopped. The sky was pale and open, washed clean in a way that felt intentional, almost symbolic. He stood by the kitchen window with a mug of coffee warming his hands, watching steam rise and disappear. His body still carried the dull ache of recovery, but it no longer demanded his attention. It simply existed, honest and present. Across the room, Annie sat at the table tying her shoes for school. She struggled with one knot, then frowned at it with determination. "You're doing it too tight," Ethan said. She shook her head. "If it's loose, it comes undone." "That's true," he said. "But if it's too tight, you can't get out of it." She considered that, loosened the knot slightly, then tied it again. This time, it held. Her mother watched from the counter, a quiet smile on her face. The fear that once clung to her movements had softened into something like trust, not blind, earned. "I'll pick her up today," Ethan said. The woman hesitated. "You don't have to. I want to," he replied. School was loud in the way only places full of children ever were. Unfiltered, chaotic, alive. Ethan waited near the gate, hands in his coat pockets. Observing, he noticed how Annie scanned the crowd instinctively, how she looked for exits before she looked for friends. Some habits didn't disappear quickly. When she spotted him, she waved once, then ran over, backpack bouncing. "You came," she said, surprised. "I said I would," Ethan replied. On the drive home, she stared out the window, quiet for longer than usual. "Are you thinking?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "About when this is over. What do you think happens then?" Ethan asked. She shrugged. "People forget." "Some do," he said. "Some remember." "I don't want you to forget," she said suddenly. He glanced at her, then back to the road. "I won't," he said. "Not what matters." That afternoon, Ethan received the final confirmation. The case would go to trial. No more negotiations. No quiet settlements. Evidence was too strong. The doctor's records, financial trails, Annie's testimony, carefully protected and supported. The truth had roots now. It wasn't going anywhere. Ethan closed his laptop slowly. This was the moment he had been moving toward the last threshold between survival and reckoning. He felt no triumph, no dread, just readiness. In the evening, he took Annie and her mother out to dinner. Not to a place that impressed, but to one that welcomed. A small neighborhood restaurant with scratched tables and warm light. No one stared. No one whispered. They ordered too much food and laughed when Annie dropped her fork. Halfway through the meal, Annie looked at Ethan seriously. "When you go talk to them," she said, "will it hurt?" "Yes," Ethan said honestly. "Then why do it?" Because if I don't, he said, someone else will get hurt later. She nodded slowly, accepting that answer the way children accepted gravity. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay awake listening to the house, the familiar sounds now stripped of threat. Pipes, wind, distant traffic. He thought of the courtroom, the questions, the attempts to soften what had been deliberate. He also thought of who he had been before, how easily he had trusted authority because it wore the right clothes and spoke the right language, how strength had once meant endurance instead of awareness. Near midnight, he went downstairs and poured himself a glass of water. As he turned back toward the stairs, he saw Annie standing in the hallway, rubbing her eyes. I had a bad dream, she said. Do you want to talk about it? Ethan asked. She shook her head and walked over, sitting beside him on the step. Will you be there when I wake up? She asked. Yes, Ethan said immediately. She leaned against him, small and warm. He rested his hand lightly on her shoulder, aware of how much trust that simple contact represented. I used to think being brave meant not being scared, she said quietly. And now? Ethan asked. I think it means telling someone anyway. He smiled, a tightness forming in his throat. You're right. When Annie finally went back to bed, Ethan remained seated for a long time. He understood now that this was the true end of the story, not the verdict, not the headlines, not the consequences that would follow. The end was this, the moment when silence lost its power. Before turning in, Ethan opened his notes document one last time. He read every line, then closed it without adding anything. The lessons were complete. Upstairs, he slept, deeply, dreamlessly. Morning came clear and bright. The day of testimony waited just beyond it. Ethan dressed carefully, not for appearance, but for steadiness. As he walked past Annie's room, she opened the door. Good luck, she said. He knelt and met her eyes. Thank you, he replied. For everything. She nodded once, solemn and certain. As Ethan stepped outside, the air felt crisp, charged with consequence. He took a breath, steady and sure. The truth was no longer whispering. It was ready to stand. The courtroom was quieter than Ethan expected. Not silent, never silent, but subdued, as if the walls themselves understood the weight of what was about to be spoken. He sat at the table with his attorney, hands folded loosely, posture steady. Across the room, his wife avoided his eyes. The doctor stared straight ahead, his confidence long gone, replaced by the brittle stillness of someone who had run out of explanations. Ethan did not look at them for long. He focused instead on the small details that anchored him to the present. The grain of the wooden bench, the faint hum of the lights, the measured breathing in his own chest. His body felt tired, but not weak. It felt honest. When his name was called, he stood without hesitation. Walking to the stand, he felt the familiar ache in his muscles, the echo of months spent dulled and controlled. He welcomed the sensation. It reminded him why he was here. He raised his hand, took the oath, and sat. The questions began simply. Name, age, occupation. Then they moved, as they always did, toward the symptoms. How long did you feel unwell? At least 8 months, Ethan said. Long enough to believe it was my fault. Who treated you? My private physician. And did you trust him? Yes, Ethan replied. Without question. The prosecutor nodded. Tell the court what changed. Ethan paused. Not because he lacked words, but because he chose them carefully. A child spoke to me, he said. She told me I wasn't sick, that I was being poisoned. A murmur moved through the courtroom, quickly stilled. Did you believe her immediately? The prosecutor asked. No, Ethan said. But I listened. The defense objected. The judge overruled. Ethan continued. I stopped following the routine that had been imposed on me. I skipped meals prepared for me. I stopped taking the pills I was told I needed. And my condition did not worsen. What did you do then? I sought independent testing, Ethan said. The results confirmed the presence of substances designed to weaken, not kill, to control, not cure. He spoke without anger, without drama. Facts, delivered steadily, carried more weight than outrage ever could. When the defense questioned him, the tone shifted. Isn't it possible? the attorney asked. That stress caused your symptoms? Stress doesn't disappear when you stop trusting the wrong people, Ethan replied. Isn't it true, the attorney pressed, that you were overworked, exhausted, emotionally distant? Yes, Ethan said calmly. And none of that justifies removing my consent. Silence followed. Then the judge dismissed him. Ethan returned to his seat, heart pounding now, not from fear but from release. The truth had crossed the room intact. Later, Annie's testimony was handled privately, her presence shielded, her words recorded with care. Ethan did not hear them spoken aloud. He didn't need to. He had lived them. When the verdict came days later, it was exactly what it needed to be. Guilty, not triumphant, not vengeful, just final. The doctor was led away quietly, the way dangerous things often were when they could no longer pretend to be helpful. His wife did not cry. She sat still, as if finally understanding that control, once exposed, had nowhere left to go. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. Ethan stepped past them. He had said what needed to be said. That evening, the house felt different again. Not lighter, not heavier, settled. Ethan stood in the doorway as Annie ran toward him, her backpack bouncing, her face bright with relief that didn't need explanation. Is it over? She asked. The part that mattered most, Ethan said. She nodded, accepting that answer the way she always did without demanding more than was honest. They sat together on the back steps as the sun lowered itself behind the trees, turning the sky soft and gold. Annie swung her legs, humming to herself. Do people stop being bad when they get caught? She asked. Sometimes, Ethan said. More often, they stop being hidden. She thought about that. That's good. Yes, Ethan agreed. It is. Later, after Annie had gone to bed, Ethan walked through the house one last time with intention. Not checking, not guarding, simply noticing. The kitchen, where his meals had once been watched. The hallway where a small voice had waited for someone to listen. The study where he had almost disappeared quietly. He turned off lights as he went, room by room, until the house rested in darkness that felt earned. In his bedroom, Ethan paused before the mirror. The man looking back at him was thinner, older, marked, but his eyes were clear. He lay down and closed his eyes, feeling the steady rhythm of his breath, the weight of the day settling into his bones. Pain flickered faintly, then faded. His body no longer fought him. It followed. Downstairs, the house was silent, not the dangerous silence of secrets, the honest kind. Morning came gently. Ethan woke to sunlight and the distant sound of a child laughing, unafraid. He sat up slowly, testing his strength. It was there. Not borrowed, not forced, his own. At the breakfast table, he poured his coffee, chose his food, and ate. Nothing happened. No dizziness, no fog, no quiet hand guiding his choices. Just life, ordinary and precious. Later, Annie passed by, tying her shoes. You're not sick, she said, as if reminding him of a fact that would never change. No, Ethan replied. I'm not. She smiled, satisfied, and ran out the door. Ethan stood by the window, watching the day begin. He had lost a marriage. He had nearly lost his life. But he had gained something rarer than comfort, rarer than power. He had learned to listen. And because of that, he was still here, not surviving, living. This story reminds us that the most dangerous harm is often quiet, hidden behind the language of care, authority, and love. It warns that trust without boundaries can become a cage, and that real illness is not always in the body, but in the lies we accept to feel safe. True strength is not blind endurance, it is the courage to question, to listen, and to reclaim one's right to choose. Sometimes, the voice that saves a life is the one society overlooks, and real justice begins the moment we decide that silence is no longer an option. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.